Well, welcome back. I'd like to talk just briefly a little bit more about how we study difficult histories. And really that's at the heart of this very short video. So when we're learning difficult histories, we need to keep a number of things in mind. Firstly, keep in mind that historians do not always agree about the meaning of the past. In fact, that's part of the joy of history. History is contested. There are different historical interpretations that are subject to academic and even popular public debate out there amongst the community. History is contested, and you as students need to develop an ability to work within this contested space, forming your own opinions and to defend those views with the use of evidence. Now remember, having opinions in history, having ideas, is not just echoing prejudices. We rely upon our research and our evidence. We have to be thinking. This is not just some exchange of ignorance. Our discipline demands of us to rigorously examine our own ideas, rigorously examine our interpretations of the past, rigorously, examine the interpretations of others, including those who are public figures, and compare those to the historical record. Now, when we're comparing to the historical record, we need to put it in context. And in an age of AI, there's often a rush towards an answer that can be generated lazily, if you like, by technology. It's really important that you build your own human intelligence, your own human understandings that form the context for your studies. You need to know your stuff. What is often happening in online spaces is the promotion of particular interpretations that might sound convincing but aren't necessarily rigorously supported with evidence. So you need to know your stuff. You need to be thinking about sources. You need to do the reading. Sure, use AI, use other sources, but this, in our discipline, is a process that is demanding of us. We're not just, exchanging ignorant prejudices. There's been too much of that in the world. So, as historians, we like to look primarily, if you pardon the sort of double up here, primarily at primary sources. If available, we like to go to the sources created at the time, unmediated by other commentary. So with sources like Trove, with oral histories being collected by libraries, archives, we can actually hear voices from the past directly and largely unmediated. At a school level, sometimes that's a little bit tricky, but we need to discerningly use a range of primary sources, and we need to keep in mind that a source is not necessarily accurate, not necessarily reliable, just because it's a primary source. We need to examine the perspectives within it and weigh that against a range of other pieces of evidence. We need to make judgments on their reliability. We need to be able to reason our arguments out in support of that judgment, and we need to be able to back up our judgment with further evidence if we need to. We need to corroborate. Because you're school students, you don't necessarily have the time or resources to dive deeply into archives as working historians do. So this is where well-selected, discerningly chosen, reliable, trustworthy secondary sources come into play. In your case, you're going to be looking for those voices who have done many of the hard yards for you by going to the primary sources. There is a wealth of research in the space of Australia's difficult histories, hard histories. But when I did my training in it, it's interesting that I picked up my work from people like Hassan Kwame Jeffries, who is an American teacher trainer, teacher historian who taught about American hard histories. It's probably why I've picked up that word. I've done a lot of my early training in the American civil rights histories, but I have to do my own reading. I have to go beyond that. I've been trained in a space, and then I have to apply the lessons of that space to this topic. Over the years, I've been incredibly privileged to work with a number of really high-quality academics and historians, and also work with a number of very, very, I guess, insightful, rigorously academic First Nations Australians. And they have also shaped my understanding of this topic. So I'm getting a balance of perspectives. The traditional narratives I've told me, which I find now looking back at my time in the 1970s school classrooms and 1980s, quite racist and narrow. And I've now built upon those understandings by looking at other sources. Now, one of the other sources that I will draw upon in my teaching of you is the work of Marcia Langdon. Now, Marcia Langdon is one of Australia's leading historians. I've also looked at other First Nations historians. I've also drawn upon sources such as this one. Sorry, I'll just remove that off the screen as I put the book down. I've gone on and had a look at histories of the civil rights movement. And books like this one, even though they're actually written for younger readers, really, really fantastic. So, hopefully you can see that screen there. It's another one of the sources I'll draw on when I'm working with you. But I'll also draw upon some high-level academic work by people like Stuart McIntyre. I'll draw upon the work of Henry Reynolds, looking at Australia's history through multiple lenses to try and get the best understandings we can that hopefully I can pass on to you. And you can then look at it and think, has this done justice to our discipline and been rigorous? Am I supporting my ideas with evidence?